and then Sotloff murdered on video. In some respect, this is where terrorists are sometimes their own worst enemies. Al-Qaeda bringing down a whole building woke up the sleeping bear. The ISIL hacking off people's heads, again, woke the sleeping bear, and the American people wanted action. So they don't necessarily trust Mr. Obama as a leader. He's looking at the polling, and he feels he has to respond.
Can I make a comment?
Go ahead, Samir.
It's only because it's a typical obfuscatory tactic of people who are pro-war to suggest that anyone who opposes war must be therefore pro-ISIS, pro-Al-Qaeda, pro-Assad. Let me finish. I absolutely despise and condemn Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and so on and so forth, as does every single person in the Stop the War Coalition. The reason why we focus on Western policy is because we live in the West. Our government is accountable to us. We have control over our government, and it's therefore incumbent on us to put pressure on our own governments to reverse its cruel and cynical policy in the Middle East. That's why we focus on the West. It's bluster for me. It would be bluster for me to sit here and condemn these feckless, horrible Muslims and talk about the cancer of Islam and all the rest of it. That would just be bluster. I'm an activist. I want to change the world for the better, so I focus on what I can do in practice, and that's opposing my own government's imperialism.
Okay, and you've made that clear. But just getting back to Barack Obama's speech yesterday, Matthew, just your take on, with the view that there's going to be no boots on the ground, is it a good idea to outsource your military action to, say, the Peshmerga forces?
Well, I think actually, in a way, this concept of leading from behind, there is some merit to it. Personally, I feel as though the Obama foreign policy is really, is all over the place, and quite frankly, everybody can now see that President Obama is way out of his depth. He is an amateur on the world stage. People, I think, are waking up to the fact that someone like Hillary Clinton would have been a much, much more experienced, tougher operator on the world stage.
I can agree to that as a Republican, even.
Yeah. Well, I therefore feel as though really the president's speech laying out the action that he's going to have to take in Syria and Iraq, he's going to really have to follow through on that, because he made such a hash of it last year with the red lines, and his credibility has been shot. He's going to have to stick to that position. But it's no good. You see, President Obama is taking the right course in terms of mixing, getting involved more of these Middle East states, because at the end of the day, as I come back, the problems here are in Middle Eastern countries, in Arab countries, or in Muslim countries. And as I've said, there have been more Muslims killed by fellow Muslims over the last decade. There's clearly a problem within the world of Islam. There is a battle going on between moderate Islam and those who want to hijack Islam and who do not speak for Islam. But the problem is that you can't say you're against all these things, but you don't want to do anything about it, that you're quite content to allow this cancer to continue to grow and not do anything about it. It would be like somebody who has cancer and the doctor says, that's dreadful, but I'm not going to do anything to help you. I'm not going to operate to take it out. And that's exactly what your Stop the War Coalition person's position is.
Okay.
And therefore, you've got to do something, and you've got to take a position and tackle it head on. Because as Sir Edmund Burke said, the only thing for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
Now, we're running out of time, and I want to get one more contribution from all of you. Charlie, 13 years on from 9/11, some in Washington are predicting a 50-year war against terrorism. I'm just wondering, do you think we've learnt lessons from the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq? Is the West tackling Al-Qaeda in a way that it wasn't more than a decade and a half ago?
I think you're always learning, and you'll always continue to learn, and you'll always make mistakes, and you'll always have new scenarios. If you think back again, it's easy to criticize a lot of what the Bush administration did. It was interesting. I was at a function with John Bellinger recently, who was, of course, the legal counsel for the State Department. And, it's easy to criticize things like Guantanamo and what have you, but as he said at the time, people didn't realize there were no laws on the books. We hadn't had something like international terrorism, putting planes into buildings, etc. They were yes, making some of this up as they had to go along. There were no laws to try these people. So it's easy to sit and criticize. And yes, I'm sure some of it was gotten wrong. But again, this was brand new territory that we had gotten into. So we have learned some things, but you never know as the world changes and unfolds what the next thing may bring to us.
Samir, I mean, what do you think? 13 years on from 9/11, is there another way of making the world safer rather than military action? I mean, you must have a view on that.
Absolutely, and we're not nihilists. We don't want to do nothing, but we think that emancipation comes from below, comes from people rising up and establishing a country that meets their basic human needs, their well-being. We don't think that emancipation comes from through high explosives being dropped from jets. That's not the intention of wars, and that's not what it achieves. The West's role has been wholly corrosive. It co-opted, it destroyed largely the Arab uprisings. But what we need are people rising up, freeing themselves from the shackles of neocolonialism and establishing states which meet their own needs and not the interests of corporations and industrialists and war generals.
Matthew, can I just get your view? We're talking about this kind of creative tension between ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Do you think Al-Qaeda will get back into the ascendancy, or do you think IS will overtake and take over the global jihadist brand?
Well, I don't really think it's actually that's not really the issue. That's not the point, because at the end of the day, they are one and the same in many respects, and they are two halves of the same coin. There might be different people, there might be different players, they may come from different areas, but their ideology is very much the same.
Although Abu Qatada this week criticised IS, didn't he? And al-Zawahiri has set up a franchise in India, so there is a kind of battle between them, isn't there?
Yes, but I mean that's really just internal politics about who's going to be the bigger man. I mean this is all about ego. I mean it's like they're saying I'm more fanatical than you. I mean really at the end of the day what it is it's all very much the same thing, which is they hate democracy, they hate women's rights, they hate gay rights, they hate Jews, they hate any Muslim that doesn't conform to their warped perspective, they hate Westerners, and they won't be satisfied until they have created their extreme caliphate. Now, I feel as though at the end of the day, you can't take this on militarily. You can only do so much militarily. This is about a battle of hearts and minds. And the best response against this is the Arab Spring, actually. It is the Arab people on the ground rising up and saying we want a democratic government and we want liberal human rights. We don't want this Sharia dictatorship. We don't want this Islamic theocracy. We don't want this military Mubarak-style dictatorship. We want actually what you in the West have. We want elections every 4 years. We want political parties.
The Americans
we want
won't let that happen. It's arming SCAF in Egypt right now.
The what, sorry?
America won't let that happen. It's arming SCAF in Egypt, which is slaughtering hundreds and hundreds of protesters. That's not going to happen whilst America has its grubby hands on the Middle East.
Well, I don't support any action that does not support democratic universal human rights. So if that is going on, I would condemn that.
So, well, that's a good place to leave it. The fight for democracy continues. Gentlemen, many thanks. That's Matthew Jamison, Consultant Fellow at RUSI, on the line there. Here in the studio, Samir Dathi, National Officer for the Stop the War Coalition, and also here in the studio, the American commentator Charlie Wolf. Many thanks for joining me. Brendan Cole on The Voice of Russia in London.